That's right. You are full of contradictions. And I don't mean that negatively. I'm not trying to say you say one thing out of one side of your mouth and then say another thing out of the other side of your mouth. That is not what I'm trying to say. No. What I'm trying to say is that you, like all things in reality, you're just a big ball of contradictions. And I mean this scientifically. And your contradictions are full of contradictions themselves. Some of those are full of their own contradictions. And they're all developing. Each contradiction is made up of two aspects in opposition to each other. Those aspects are changing themselves and changing each other, turning into each other in given circumstances. And even though you could just say reality itself is just a stream of contradictions, they take qualitatively different forms. And even though you're just a ball of contradictions, you can influence the larger stream of contradictions, especially if you know how this process works and it develops. That'd help. And if you don't know how this process works and develops, you're more likely to make mistakes in your plans. And if you know more about this process, you're less likely to make mistakes in your plans. Hopefully your plans include helping the oppressed and working masses of people. Hopefully. I would hate to see you use Marxism for evil. You know, can't have that. And yeah, that's effectively it. You're just a ball of contradictions. That's all you are. That's all you are. And this is the case for all things in reality. And at any one time, in any process where there are many contradictions, there's one main contradiction or a principal contradiction. It plays the dominant role, the others secondary. And in any contradiction, there are two aspects. Because of the law of unequal development of things, one of those aspects will be the dominant aspect. Not necessarily the entire time, throughout the life of each stage of the contradiction. That can sometimes change. As can, in the mainstream of contradictions, the primary contradiction. It can sometimes become secondary, and a secondary contradiction can become primary. And within each contradiction, there is the unity, or the struggle, or what we call the identity of struggle, of the aspects of a contradiction. And in given circumstances, the aspects of those contradictions switch places. They take each other's form in one way. That's pretty much what we've read so far, up to section 6 today, which is what we're about to get into here. In which we'll talk about the place of antagonism in a contradiction. Place of antagonism. So you should already be asking yourself, what is he getting at? What does he mean, antagonism? Because you know what contradiction means. We've talked about this at length. If you don't, that's okay. Maybe you're like me. Maybe you learn through repetition. That's fine. Go back. Try to relearn what you previously stuck in your head. Sometimes it falls out, you know? That's what I find about knowledge. Sometimes you stick something in your head and it makes sense one day and it's fallen out. It's gone. Where did it go? I don't know, but that's how it works sometimes. So if you're like me, you learn through repetition. But if this helps, I'll go ahead and try to front load you with this, which is that antagonism is one form, but not the only form of the struggle of opposites. So in a struggle of opposites, sometimes it takes the form of antagonism. Not always. For instance, antagonism between classes exists as a particular manifestation of the struggle of opposites. Antagonism. And we'll get more into what this means as we talk about it in section 6, the place of antagonism in contradiction. And if I haven't already said so, welcome to Read Aloud with Dan. That's me. If you like this content, feel free to support it. It means a lot. Thank you. And thanks to everyone who ever has supported my content. Thank you very much. Again, in this section, we'll be discussing section 6, the place of antagonism in contradiction. Section 6. The question of the struggle of opposites includes the question of what is antagonism. Our answer is that antagonism is one form, but not the only form, of the struggle of opposites. In human history, antagonism between classes exists as a particular manifestation of the struggle of opposites. Consider the contradiction between the exploiting and the exploited classes. Such contradictory classes coexist for a long time in the same society, be it slave society, feudal society, or capitalist society. They struggle with each other, but it is not until the contradiction between the two classes develops to a certain stage that it assumes the form of open antagonism and develops into revolution. The same holds for the transformation of peace into war. Why do I say it like that? In class society. Before it explodes, a bomb is a single entity in which opposites coexist in given conditions. The explosion takes place only when a new condition, ignition, is present. An analogous situation arises in all those natural phenomena which finally assume the form of open conflict to resolve old contradictions and produce new things. It is highly important to grasp this fact. It enables us to understand that revolutions and revolutionary wars are inevitable in class society, and that without them, it's impossible to accomplish any leap in social development and to overthrow the reactionary ruling classes, and therefore impossible for the people to win political power. The reactionary ruling classes have made it so that if you want to develop the productive forces in your society, you have to literally fight them. And that without fighting them, revolution's impossible. Sometimes, because of the existing contradictions, development is hindered in such a way that antagonism is made inevitable. This is not the case with all contradictions, but it is the case with some. And study of human history shows that is the case with society. It is inevitable. The violence that the owning and ruling classes will receive is inevitable. And it's because of them. It's because of the way they rule. Mao says communists must expose the deceitful propaganda of the reactionaries, such as the assertion that social revolution is unnecessary and impossible. They must firmly uphold the Marxist-Leninist theory of social revolution and enable the people to understand that social revolution is not only entirely necessary, but also entirely practicable, and that the whole history of mankind and the triumph of the Soviet Union have confirmed this scientific truth. However, we must make a concrete study of the circumstances of each specific struggle of opposites, and should not arbitrarily apply the formula discussed above to everything. He says contradiction and struggle are universal and absolute. But the methods of resolving contradictions, that is, the forms of struggle, differ according to the differences in the nature of the contradictions. Of course, you solve different problems differently. The thing is this: if it's being said, you know there's a reason that it's being said. You know, if there's a rule at the swimming pool, you know there's a rule for the it's because someone broke that rule. He's thinking of someone right now. He's thinking of something. Because in his experience, some leaders are treating all the problems the same. So he says, no, you have to treat them differently, and here's why. And guess what? A good teacher, a good leader, eventually gives that explanation. You cannot assume everyone's on your level. Like, look at what Mao's doing right now. He's like delivering this message in a way that's very easily understood by the masses. He's talking down to people in a way, but he's trying to do it in the most, thoughtful way he can. Because this shit's important. Because when mistakes are made within the party, people die. Battles are lost. Revolutions are destroyed, etc. Like, this shit's important. Okay? So reading on, he says, Right. The methods of resolving contradictions differ according to the differences in the nature of the contradictions. So that's why you have to study the specific contradiction, their unity and struggle, as well as their different aspects. And maybe the different aspects are made up of different contradictions. So sometimes you got to go down the rabbit hole if you want to understand a thing. He says some contradictions are characterized by open antagonism, others are not. So you can't treat every contradiction the same. In accordance with the concrete development of things, some contradictions which were originally non-antagonistic develop into antagonistic ones, while others which were originally antagonistic develop into non-antagonistic ones. It's not hard. All you have to do is think about your own relationships with people, which go through similar phases. As already mentioned, so long as classes exist, contradictions between correct and incorrect ideas in the Communist Party are reflections within the party of class contradictions. Did that sentence make sense to me? Oh, they're reflections within the party of class contradictions. I get it now. At first, with regard to certain issues, such contradictions may not manifest themselves as antagonistic. But with the development of the class struggle, they may grow and become antagonistic. That's because all things are developing. The history of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union shows us that the contradictions between the correct thinking of Lenin and Stalin and the fallacious thinking of Trotsky, Bukharin, and others did not at first manifest themselves in an antagonistic form, but that later they did develop into antagonism, you could say. There are similar cases in the history of the Chinese Communist Party. At first, the contradictions between the correct thinking of many of our party comrades and the fallacious thinking of Chen Duxiu, Zhang Guotao, and others did not manifest themselves in an antagonistic form, but later they did develop into antagonism. I think we spoke earlier of Chen Duxiu. I don't remember Zhang Guotao, though. At present, the contradiction between correct and incorrect thinking in our party does not manifest itself in an antagonistic form, and if comrades who have committed mistakes can correct them, it will not develop into antagonism. Therefore, the party must, on the one hand, wage a serious struggle against erroneous thinking, and on the other, give the comrades who have committed errors ample opportunity to wake up. 1 second. Says, this being the case, excessive struggle is obviously inappropriate. Not sure what that means. Saying, but if the people who have committed errors persist in them and aggravate them, there is the possibility that this contradiction will develop into antagonism. And that's how it works in party politics. Economically, the contradiction between town and country is an extremely antagonistic one both in capitalist society, where under the rule of the bourgeoisie, the towns ruthlessly plundered the countryside, and in the Kuomintang areas in China, where under the rule of foreign imperialism and the Chinese big comprador bourgeoisie, the towns most rapaciously plunder the countryside. But in a socialist country and in our revolutionary base areas, this antagonistic contradiction has changed into one that is non-antagonistic. And when communist society is reached, it will be abolished. Lenin said, antagonism and contradiction are not at all one and the same. Under socialism, the first will disappear, the second will remain. That is to say, antagonism is one form, but not the only form of the struggle of opposites. The formula of antagonism cannot be arbitrarily applied everywhere. And I was thinking about how, there's some folks who love to take a relationship and raise it to the level of antagonism. And how that affects their ability to have adult relationships. I think everyone's got to learn that lesson at some point in their life. So, with that was a relatively short section, I think. Easy to understand. The place of antagonism. It's when a contradiction sort of boils over into open conflict. It doesn't happen with all contradictions. And it doesn't happen, and in the cases that it does happen, it doesn't happen throughout the entire stage of the development of a contradiction. Sometimes it's only one stage. Sometimes it starts out as contradiction, as antagonism, and then fizzles out. Sometimes it starts out pretty chill and then ramps up into antagonism. That's the nature of contradictions. Okay, that's how it works, you guys. Sometimes it's antagonistic and sometimes it's not. You can't treat it all the same. All right. It's a simple lesson, but I guess it's important. It's important enough that Mao made it an entire section on contradiction. Well, I hope you enjoyed reading that with me. Section 6. Yeah. There it is. Okay. Well, I hope you enjoyed reading that with me. If you're watching the replay, why don't you check out Section 7, the conclusion. And if you liked what you heard, if you enjoyed this, feel free to support my content. It means a lot. If you're watching live, stick around. We'll talk about other stuff. Love your face.